Sometimes you can just get busy and, running through life. And sometimes a movie like that helps you, in a way, remember and re-feel some of these wonderful feelings that you have for one another.
It's so romantic.
It was kind of, to me, long-lasting relationship development.
It's one of those movies at the end you just go, ah.
Yeah. Hi, it's just us today. Usually our daughter Cherry introduces us and welcomes you to the Fascinating Womanhood channel, where we talk about everything that has to do with femininity and building long-lasting, loving relationships.
She's got it down really good.
She does it better than I do. I know.
Anyway, she couldn't join us this morning, and so we thought we would do this video. I'm lucky enough to have my husband, Bob, here. I'm Dixie Andelin Forsyth. This is my husband, Bob, Dr. Robert Forsyth. And today we're going to do something that is actually kind of fun. We're going to talk about 5 of our favorite, most romantic movies. And they may not be yours, which is absolutely fine. And I'd love to hear some of yours as well. We're only going to do 5 of them. But
there's more.
Although there's more, yeah. But these are our favorite 5, and they're not all new. In fact, some of them are quite old. So the first one we chose is a lot of people's favorites, which is Pride and Prejudice. The plot of this, is, a lot of you know, is a story about different classes of people like they had in Great Britain in those days, where if you didn't marry for money, sometimes you could end up with basically starving to death. So it's a story of love and romance in the early 19th century, in the 1820s, 30s, somewhere in there. That's the basic plot. The main character, Elizabeth Bennet, a very famous character, she at first doesn't really like the main love interest, Colin Firth, who's Mr. Darcy, because he seems proud. And the truth is he's kind of shy, and she doesn't recognize it. What are the things you love? He
comes across as kind of aloof and arrogant and kind of condescending. And even says, well, she's not handsome enough to tempt me.
That was unfortunate. Yeah. She overheard him say that.
It's interesting to me, I think, that sometimes you meet a person, but you don't always get a great impression, or you might misread somebody. I think that she showed a bit of a character arc there, where she starts to differentiate between someone who looks good or sounds good and someone who maybe really is that good person. And so it's interesting how that whole romantic plot unfolds, and eventually Mr. Darcy shows more of his true self, and she sees more of his true self. I guess I like the fact that she was willing to deal with her prejudice, and he learned to deal with his pride. Maybe they both had a little bit of the other, both, but they dealt with these two in a way, just normal, what we might call flaws in a way in each of us, and they got past those. And I thought that was pretty inspiring.
I like that both of them were people with great character. They both liked honesty and honor and being truthful. The next film that we'd like to talk about is one of our favorites, maybe because we're older. I don't know. But the movie, The Notebook. It's the story of a young couple that meets just before World War II, and then it starts, and then how their relationship develops, and they got kind of split apart for a while, and then they get back together, and they love each other through their entire lives. And at the very end of the film, they're old, and all they want to do is just basically die together.
Yeah, it shows kind of, to me, long-lasting relationship development. He loved her even when she started to have some dementia, and then they died in each other's arms. And I don't know why, but that always just sort of has been hard for me to watch without kind of tearing up a little bit.
Our favorite movies are ones we've watched
several times.
Yeah. What I liked about it too is kind of like what you liked, was how their relationship lasts, their love lasted through their entire lives.
It's kind of like comfort food. We have comfort movies. We sometimes will watch again just because we enjoy the feelings that it brings up. And it's interesting, sometimes when we watch these movies together, it almost in a way deepens or helps us appreciate one another more. Sometimes you can just get busy and, running through life. And sometimes a movie like that helps you in a way remember and re-feel some of these wonderful feelings that you have for one another. Anyway, I think the next one is Scarlet Pimpernel.
It's so romantic. There's been several versions of it, but that one is our favorite.
Based on the book, yeah.
Based on the book. It's a period one. It takes place during the French Revolution. And I love movies that are set around that time.
Yeah.
I love the costumes and the music is beautiful. It's about fictitious. I used to actually think he was a real person. The writer of the book wrote several Pimpernel books. And there's one book where she talks about him as though he was a real person. And he was an aristocrat in England. And he went over to France and rescued people from the guillotine that were innocent. And he rescued them, and he had all these disguises, and he was really brave and really romantic. And he falls in love with Marguerite Saint-Just, who's a French famous actress, and that's Jane Seymour.
I enjoyed the kind of the double, in a way, personality. He presented himself as a very kind of self-centered, arrogant, almost effeminate British gentleman who was more concerned about his boots and his tailoring of his shirt and so on than anything. But there was a lot more depth to him, and it was a facade he put on. It was a facade to protect himself, and he was secretly in terrible danger and rescuing people at the peril of his own life. And
he had a small band of men, loyal men,
gentlemen that worked with him.
That worked with him and risked their lives to save. And they saved thousands of people from the guillotine. Now, I think he was fictitious, but boy, she made him seem so real in some of these books. So I loved Jane Seymour's character. I loved the way she portrayed her. Her hair was amazing. Her costumes were amazing. And the stark difference between his masculinity and her femininity was beautiful. She was brave, but she was extremely brave, but in a feminine way. And he was extremely brave, but in a masculine way.
Yeah. And that courage kind of complemented each other from a sort of masculine strength perspective and a feminine strength or core strength perspective.
It's one of those movies at the end, you just go, ah.
Yeah. It works out great.
The next one is the oldest one, and it's called Random Harvest. I bought it because I love it so much. This story is a little implausible, but so what? It's really romantic. It's a story about an English lord, really. He's a very wealthy man who is, as a young man who's fighting in World War I, and he gets hit, and when he comes to, he loses his memory of who he was, his name and everything. And so he ends up what they call an asylum. What was an asylum in those days? People who were traumatized from the war.
Right. Maybe people who'd been in the war or somehow had some, they had some, in a way, you could say mental problem that they needed help with.
Yeah. And he was in there, and they said he was well, but they said they would have released him, but he couldn't remember who he was. They didn't have any family to release him to. So
it's a great amnesia story.
Yeah, I know it is. That's why it's a little improbable. But anyway, so World War I ends, and he kind of escapes because everyone's so excited they forget to watch the gates, and he just wanders out, and he meets Greer Garson, and their relationship goes from there. And she doesn't know who he is either.
Well, he doesn't remember who he is, and she doesn't know. He's just a guy with nothing, really.
So it follows the story. We're not going to give you the whole thing, but it has he does end up remembering who he was, and a lot of things happen that are kind of stressful but wonderful, and their love for each other that they develop in the beginning when he doesn't know who he is and she doesn't know who he is, end up kind of coming back full circle.
Well, he falls in love with her while he's in the amnesia phase, and then he has some incident that brings him back to his real self, and he forgets.
Which is the part that's not really.
He forgets the amnesia part.
Yeah, which isn't really.
And then he meets her again on other circumstances, and he falls in love with her again. So he falls in love with her twice.
Yeah.
almost two different people, discovers the same woman, falls in love with her, and then finally he kind of pulls all this stuff together. It's kind of just a neat story.
It's a neat story. It has a wonderful ending, and it's black and white, but I don't mind black and white. I think it's kind of charming. And Greer Garson is so feminine. She is in all of the films that I've ever seen her in. She's just really a feminine person to kind of emulate after. The way she talks to people, the way she talks to everyone.
Can I just say that, we've actually got other movies that we really love, but this last one that we're doing,
the one we're about
it's really an unusual one. It's probably something we never would have seen, except that our daughter and her husband stumbled across this, and they said, I think you guys would like this. And it's called Resurrection. It's Turkish filmmaking, but it's really amazing.
Well,
done.
It's a story basically about the beginning of the formation of the Ottoman Empire.
So it's a period piece. Yeah.
Yeah. It takes place in like the 1200s. The costumes are fantastic. The music is spectacular. The music score is second to none of music scores I've ever heard. It's beautifully done. It's on Netflix. It's very long, which Bob and I love, because you can say, let's watch an episode or two.
Well, there's 5 seasons and each one has like 100 episodes.
It's long. Yeah. But you get so involved, it's hard to imagine that the characters aren't real. And so it's the story of him and the love story between him and his wife, Halime. Well,
spectacular.
The thing that we love about it, both of us love about it, is there's a clear divide between the men and the women. The men are so masculine and heroic.
Heroes. And she says, my hero. She used that term.
They call each other my lion or my hero. The men are warriors. They have to be. The women all have had to learn how to fight in that tribe because they live in very difficult times, but they don't do it alongside the men unless they have to. The men protect them, but they've had to learn to fight for survival.
Right. Well, you've got a hero and you've got a heroine, and you've got both of those concepts, because they're not just men that are heroes. Women are heroic and courageous too.
It's really romantic. It's beautifully done. We're watching it for the second time. There's clear lines of masculinity and femininity.
And the character development. I think that there are true good characters in it. I think I love the emphasis on rooting out corruption in government, trying to be honest and responsible and helpful to people around you. And there's just so many good character qualities in this series that I think some of the movies that I see now, sometimes I almost feel like I'm not sure there's any real good people in this whole movie.
Entire film.
They're all just shooting everybody and trying to get what they can get. And this shows some true people of character who have a bigger picture for not only their relationships, but for life and for their civilization and for bettering everyone. And it's just a really hopeful and inspiring plot.
Well, I have to say, the other thing is that I love about it is that they are so faithful in their religion. Now, we are people of faith too. We're Christian, they're Muslim, but I love their dedication to their religion and their faith to God.
In God, yeah.
Yeah, and it's consistent through the whole thing. They rely on God to get them through their hard times. They have so much faith. It's very impressive.
Yeah, their faith in God is kind of what pulls them through everything.
Everything. The bad people are really bad, and the good people are really good. So anyway, I can't say enough good about that one. Yeah. Anyway, that's our little fun thing for today on some of our favorite romantic movies. And there's more. We could probably do another 5 pretty easily because there's some really good ones. And share some of your favorite ones below. We'd love to hear from you and why you like them. Thank you for joining us. And thanks, Bob, I don't always get him to join me, but
we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Take care.